So, who is Donald Hood? Well, I guess there may be a giveaway in there somewhere, but I was reading about tax policy. What else would you want to indulge in on a relatively sleepy Monday in the second month of our Lord 2026? Tax policy, but I'm always looking for ways that the party of the wealthy, the Republican Party, is trying to hoodwink the middle class and other voters and residents that are under a great deal more financial strain than the gentlemen that were nice enough to attend DJT's inauguration, right? So, tax policy in regard to Elon, Jeff, Mark, Mark Andreessen, and all of those tech bros and the heads of the Jamie Dimon and the elite, the 1%. Tax policy does affect them, but they can afford to purchase, to hire the best representation available to help them dodge taxes, and they do it all the time. And as long as it's the law, and they're not doing, what your current president is doing, and breaking the law for personal gain, that's fine. But I was looking at the state level, and it's kind of a tale as old as time, which is, and Donald isn't doing the theft in this regard directly, because, of course, property tax is imposed locally, right? It's laws that are promulgated by state, and that are and for depending on the jurisdiction, where do the benefits flow to on the city level, county level, and state level is all handled by the individual states. The Republican Party was always the states' rights party, you know, federalism. Let the states take care of it. And that's what they said. And they still do when they want to set up a con, right? Like with overturning Roe, you know, they'll just, anytime there's a difficult issue in front of the federal government, your president and the ne'er-do-well Senate, John Thune, and House of Representatives, Mike Johnson, will say, "Well, no, we're gonna leave that to the states to decide because that's what our founders would have liked," which which redirects attention away from the subject until they figured out a way to steal the shit, to take what they to to take possession of that which they were covetous of in the first place. And most of the time, that's your money. State property taxes. It has been argued that property taxes, in and of themselves, whether nobody likes paying taxes, but there has to be a mechanism for funding schools and other local endeavors that cost money, and that's property taxes. All states collect property taxes, some more and some less. The ones that collect a little bit more, you would guess, maybe more progressive states, more progressive governments, and it's almost true. I mean, there's some tweeners like Colorado that kind of swings is a switch hitter, both sides of the plate. But the ones that are of particular interest now are the ones with the most reprehensible governors, the ones that are doing everything short of um, a technical merchandising scheme. Everything short of dropping trowel for Donald Trump they are doing because they're subservient to him and they're afraid of what he can do for their electoral prospects in the future. Uh, Ron DeSantis of Florida and Greg Abbott of Texas are both uh, involved in trying to. They're doing a really neat game where they get the really harsh and the policies that favor the the top 1%, the most wealthy in those particular states. They get the legislatures to run interference for them and to make have scheduled debates and hue and cry and this is too much, that's too little. This constituent is great. Look how we're taking care of people of color in our state. This is fantastic. And there's a lot of performative PR. But what the leaders of those two states, they are powerful men in their specific states. Greg Abbott doesn't have designs on the White House, but Ron DeSantis certainly does. I don't know how he views it now. If he's taking third possession in the food line behind JD Vance and Marco Rubio. Excuse me. There's still a lot of time to go. But, DeSantis in the last round before Trump knocked everybody else out was thought that he was a pretty interesting prospect in the last elections. And lo and behold, he's got sent back to Tallahassee. What they want to do, I hope you're sitting down, is to give the maximum advantage to their wealthiest citizens, their wealthiest interest groups, and bird just flew by. How about that? Yeah. Sorry. Impromptu weather report. It's a joy to sit out. It's 20 degrees warmer than it was 2 days ago, and it's still below freezing. But low winter sun. That's why I have these shades on. Otherwise, I would be in some trouble. Um, yeah. So what they're doing, I guess again, tale as old as time. Tax policy that favors the wealthy. Shocking. But how do you get there? Right? Because it's not a novel idea. And you have to, in many of the state constitutions, you're required to show your work. You know, if you are eliminating this source of revenue in the form of property tax, how are you making up the shortfall? Because we have amendments that say you must show where that other money is coming from. Right? So the oldest Republican trick in the playbook is to swap out property taxes for more regressive taxes, ones that impact the lower echelon of the tax base much more than the upper echelon of the tax base. So we can look at them both together because they're not the same plan, but they are of the same flavor. Right? What we know about property tax, I'm going to say some things that are very obvious, but it'll make me feel better because anything that makes me feel better about myself, like I'm going to come out with a 25-cent word, that's kind of like patting myself on the back on a Monday, which is fun, and we can all use a little a little uplift, right? So property taxes, you will not be surprised to learn, are only paid by people that own property, and that's almost true. Right? You could say that, well, the property owners are carrying a lot of the weight, because they're the ones that own the property. So shouldn't we be grateful to the rich people for we are helping them to grow their their estate for their kids, right? Their net worth. The best way to accumulate wealth is to own a home. There are other gadgets. Don't look at your crypto accounts, or if you bought a lot of gold and you didn't get out, you've been on vacation, check in. But the fact is that, not all people that own property that's not their primary home. And no Lisa Cook, no mortgage fraud. I didn't fill in the form right. She's fine. And so is Adam Shifty Schiff. I just had to say that because it's so silly. So the property tax that's collected goes to a large part. It varies by jurisdiction again, but that's a lot of it is funding for schools. Right? So the Republicans, what would they like to do? Almost as much as give money to their wealthy donors, screw with the schools, disadvantage or otherwise do the do to public schools what Project 2025 is doing to the United States government. Right? They would like to cause fractures in the system so they can pick it apart, implement laws that allow them to have Christian day schools that are funded by taxpayer. That's those are Christian madrasas, right? That's what they want to do in Texas and in large parts of Florida. Although there are parts of Florida that are quite progressive, it's shrinking. And Ronnie DeSantis is fully in the pocket, probably with both hands in the pocket of Donald Trump. So he will do what Trump tells him to do, and this is a way to reward donors while you're assaulting public schools. And that goes down that whole pathway into, well, we take away all their money. Well, if you had let us have the voucher program in the first place, then it would have been fine, which is a horrible argument. But you have Ms. McMahon, that is the former CEO of WWFE, whatever, wrestling, right? She's in charge. She's in charge of the Department of Education. Now, obviously, property taxes, education are state decisions, but messages from the top, from Trump and Ms. McMahon, are destroy public schools and we'll start over and allow us to, put more 10 commandments in every classroom. Allow us to tailor, force the local jurisdictions to use our state designed educational uh, program, design, schedules, um, the holidays. What do we teach? We're not teaching it's Black History Month, right? They would, in those two states, they would continue the assault. They want to, their opinion on what should be taught in schools is not what history knows occurred, but it's more the way that they would like to see themselves portrayed by history. So that sticky subject about slavery and bringing humans over as chattel and boats and all that inconvenient history that the Republicans would like to make that go away, that was just a bad dream. It didn't really happen. And it doesn't, uh, I didn't personally own any slaves, so why should I be paying for the bad behavior of my ancestors? Well, your ancestors, they're not available for comment. And unless we're making positive change in the country to address the historical inequities that allowed that to continue for so long, then we're not, as the overused rhetorical question, what are we doing here? Right? Silly, silly people. And that's the whole Voting Rights Act and chop, chop, chop. So, what they will do is in these states, and Ohio is working diligently to be right there with them, and that's another, Republican state that Trump carried with a Republican governor, uh, to Wise, that will be happy to follow suit with DeSantis and Greg Abbott. And so lots of background noise, lots of shiny things, promises about making it up in a more equitable way with sales and excise tax. It's like, no, it's no, believe it, trust us. It'll be more fair because everybody has to buy stuff, and so the property tax thing. It's not efficient. They'll come up with it's if they can't use waste, fraud, and abuse, which is the big lie that Elon used in Doge and all that, and is oft repeated by GOP sycophants that want to suck up to Donald Trump. Then they'll say, it's more efficient and in the interest of fairness, we want to let the rich people off and then spread the burden more equitably, which to them means spread more of the burden to the bottom quartile of the electorate because they're voting for Democratic candidates in larger numbers than the rich are. Right. So they, if it's $1 million, right, and they scrap it, and what they'll do is regressive taxes, and regressive only means that they tend to target the lower quartiles, those that can less afford it. When you think about, somebody who is on that earns minimum wage, right? They have to pay the same amount for a gallon of milk as Elon Musk's nanny has to pay for it, right? So there's no sliding scale, right? So the impact of inflation on those that can least afford it is absurdly high, right? It's crippling. It The people that are in not even the top 1%, people that are earning over $250,000 a year, they can afford to shop where they want, buy the food that they want, not enough money to buy 10 Teslas and light them on fire in the driveway just for entertainment purposes. It's not limitless, but people that are comfortable, right? Upper middle class can afford to go to the fancy Jeff Bezos market, right? And buy your baby arugulas or whatever those people like to buy. And it doesn't impact your overall financial position. If, on the other side, you are a minimum wage worker, you are scrounging every dollar that you can just to pay your rent, which keeps going up. The cost of heating your home, like the people down in Texas. If it's been, up here, you hear me bitch about the cold a little bit, but guess what? I'm from here. I got clothes. I'm used to the cold. I'm older than time itself. So I don't, I'm not going to get chilly, and I have a little extra padding around around my midsection. So yeah, I'm not going to be suffering. But people that I talked to a beautiful and talented young family member uh, in um, in North Florida yesterday or the day before, and it snowed in North Florida, and the overnight temperature was in the 20s. There are people down there that don't have heat. You know, there are people that are lighting things on fire in their domiciles that are not supposed to be burned for the purposes of staying warm and being able to sleep and all that. It's it's been really hard, and the gas bills and the electricity bills and everything ties together. Build data centers, electricity, the cost of heating goes way the hell up, and families all of a sudden have bills that are 25% higher than the prior year to fund the data centers for your boy Elon or Marky Mark or whoever it is. And that's something that we're going to be wrestling with. You'll hear the government saying that, no, we have a promise from Amazon that they're going to construct and bear the entire cost of their own energy generation demands for this data center that's right here yonder down the way in Mississippi. So don't worry. If the price of your electricity goes up, it isn't because we gave a lifetime tax credit to this enormously wealthy billionaire so they could build a data center and make more money. It was exogenous factors. It was the divine intervention. It was the epiphany. It was something else. It's not because we did something to screw poor people so we could give more money to rich people, because obviously we're in government. We wouldn't ever do something as cynical and freaking horrible as that. Believe it. Trust us. Trust us. Our word is our bond. We are your elected representatives. So, yeah, all the way to the back. Yeah. So, regressive taxes. So, what do? You swap out $100 in property tax and you make it up, call it 50-50 in sales tax and excise tax. Right? So, what I just talked about, the increased costs caused by inflation are not absorbed in the same manner with rich families as they are with poor or economically challenged families. Also with excise taxes. That can be, things like, sounds like I'm in the 1950s, but, cigarettes. Does anybody smoke anymore? Um, Liquor and other such items. They can mess around with, gas taxes and all that. But we'll just say excise taxes on certain items that they can make additional, and they can, tax that locally, you know, and you can make up a little bit by increasing, you know, uh, vehicle fees and just, little nickels and dimes, a way to make your life miserable. But you can just say taxes, right? And all of those excise taxes and sales taxes disproportionately affect the poor people. It doesn't mean that the rich don't end up paying their share of those. They pay a share of it, not their fair share, nowhere near, but they pay some of it. It just doesn't affect their lives as it does with poor folk, right? So, that is the Republican playbook. And now, while the Republicans' flag is flying high, for hopefully not for very long, but Donald Trump is the president until he's not, and he can pull along, even though he doesn't implement local real estate tax policy, he can beat the ever loving heck out of local state legislatures in order to deliver to the Greg Abbotts and the Ron DeSantises what Trump wants done. And if he could go to the voters and say, my friend Ron DeSantis and I eliminated your property taxes. How do you like that? Last year, you paid $37,000 in property taxes. I'm just making up a number. But, it can be, I think in Jersey, which is one of the highest, if not the highest in the, in the country. So, it's based on appraised value. And is it 3% with offsets for homestead exemptions? And, there's all sorts of little devices, bells and whistles, but it's real money, right? And you got a $1 million home, right? Then you're not paying 30% of $1 million, right? So that's 300. But could you very easily be paying 36? So are you paying $3,000 a month in property taxes? Quite possibly. Quite possibly. Right? And that they need to make that up. They shift that over to sales taxes, and people that can't afford to live now will have all of that dumped on top of them. They're paying sales tax now, but in some, in Florida, as an example, they're talking about in some places where they have you know, uh, essentially doubling the sales tax in order to cover for the for the deficit with the elimination or 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 aggressive reduction of the property tax. And they're going to do this. You're going to see it run rampant in particularly states that are controlled by Republican governors with Republican legislatures. And Trump will be jumping up and down. It's less, if you'll excuse the expression, you know, property tax is not a sexy subject, right? Doesn't inspire awe. It is shock and awe, any kind of awe. But it's an it's an easy way if you just write the legislation according to the Constitution. If you're required to offset the cuts, so you make the cuts, you can do it over 5 years. You know, you can freeze certain taxes for a period of time. You can mess around with the homestead exemption and try to help. You know, of course, they're going to try to help rich white people because that's what they do, and that's who they are. But they can play that game very effectively, and we'll look for it to happen in Florida and Texas first, Ohio, and then watch the other states. It's a kind of I said efficient at the front end of this to sort of characterize the blather that comes out of their mouth. They justify, like I said, we're being they're robbing us blind. These these immigrants that are charging over the border to work in the fields and do the jobs that our people don't want to do, they're going to the hospital 10 times a day to get treatment because it's free. So that's why your Medicaid costs are so high, is because illegal aliens are running over, they're grabbing neighbors off the street in Mexico, carrying them into the country and running to the hospital and getting medical care just so your medical costs are going to skyrocket because they're mean people, or they're what some of the things that they come up with are beyond. They stretch, you know, the imagination is pretty fantastic. So, in any case, that's just a quick tax primer for when this starts. That's the risk. The our 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 human dilemma is so much so much crap all the time, every day, elevated right now because of the distract from the Jeffrey Epstein dump. And that just for Donald Trump to instruct Pamela Joe Bondi to dump the names of all of the victims because they didn't make a because they threatened to disclose the names of Trump's rich friends and donors and foreign diplomats that don't want it talked about because they have family. I don't give a shit about what they want, but I'm just saying that they are calling the White House and saying, are you a Israeli PM? Are you, you're not the prince? There's no more secrets about Prince Andrew in a can. But there are others who are leaders of industry. We've all seen probably more than we ever wanted to see about Bill Gates, right? Uh, I, you see a story about the connection, the Mossad, Israeli intelligence, and then you can be connect the dots between Bill Gates, Russian hooker, Bibi Netanyahu, and Ehud Barak, Vladimir Putin, and Donald J. Trump. And of course, Bill Clinton is there too. I'm not at this point. We're not playing favorites. In party. There's nothing to be gained there because that gets your attention away from what it needs to be in that instance. I mean, it's a distraction, but there are very real victims that you know about, that you've read about, you've heard about them taking their lives. April will be 1 year since that nice young lady who had lived down in Australia for a while took her life because of the stress and strain of that whole ordeal, the uh, the psychological scars of that whole experience, and there are many more of them, and Trump decided because he was angry that they weren't being quiet when he told them, like he did to another reporter in the Oval the other day, be quiet, right? Which is just freaking maddening. But they were they were raped as children, and Trump was appalled at the nerve, at the temerity of these women who had been raped by rich men, that they wanted to tell their story. I mean, where do these women? Who gave them permission to tell their story? I didn't allow this. I am King Donald, right? So he was a little bit fluffed or aggrieved. Right? But if there's any good news, is that the we're going to get all the information. Pamela Joe Bondi will continue to play games with some of the most sensitive parts of this. and Todd Blanche will do the same thing. But we're there now, and everything, and again, what we will learn, and I hope we punish 4 times as vigorously when the victims come out. The victims are infinitely more believable than our own attorney general. That's not a proposition, that's just fact because they've been telling the truth, what that has been verified, and she and Todd Blanche have been misrepresenting the truth to America and to Congress all the way along. So they will come out, and when they say no, there wasn't no owners of didn't see any owners of any NFL teams here in the files. Didn't see that. And then hopefully one of the victims will walk into a press conference with a team jersey on. And over and over again. Because at this point, they need to be punished. Statute of limitations is it depends, of course, on the crime, right? In Florida, there isn't any statute of limitations on sex trafficking, but there are in every different jurisdiction, there are different rules and of course double jeopardy, all of the things that we need to be aware of. And of course, innocent until proven guilty. But no, there's too much. There's enough guilt to go around. And if you're the CEO of a multinational, whoever you are, or you're just a lawyer that happened to be hanging at Epstein's estate in New York with an Israeli PM and Alan Dershowitz, right? And you were doing what you do. You need to be exposed. You need to be named. You need them to say your name, the victims, now that they've been outed by which was a very well puzzling strategic decision because whatever little bit of power Trump and his team of liars and malcontents, whatever power they had over these girls, women now, then girls, was in the disclosure. That was a lot of it, right? And now that is no longer the case. So they can be re-traumatized every time they talk about it. I'm in no position to comment on that because that's not my position as a old white guy, right? But I hope if it serves their purposes, if it serves them well, if it brings them closure, I hope they absolutely assassinate verbally every single man that participated in that uh, unfortunate crime over and over again. So we'll see. So pleasure, an exciting Monday of tax policy, property tax policy, Florida, Texas, a little bit of Ohio. Fat Ronnie DeSantis, Greg Abbott, and Mr. DeWine, right? In my birth state of Ohio. They'll do silly shit to advantage their donors, get them all the cash that they can. And imagine, I mean, all these guys have, and girls and women and men, they have big houses. Their tax bills are even with homestead protections that they're probably messing around with by paying off the property appraiser to keep the value artificially low, whatever. But it's real money, right? So, like, even if you're relatively wealthy, you're saying, you're going to have an extra $162,000 over the next 5 years. So, since you got the money coming, why don't you like just slice me off half of that because I'm your candidate? Send me a little check to my campaign fund, and you and I will be besties, at least as long as I'm in office, or until I go to prison for raping underage women. So, in any case, wishing you well, a beautiful remainder of your Monday, and we'll connect again sometime tomorrow. Thanks very much.